Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I'd like to welcome you all to the Elevate podcast. I'm very, very excited about the guest today. He's someone I've known for a long time now, and he's one of those people who had everything in the material world and seemingly, to some extent, abandoned that and went to serve God's cause. My guest today was an amazing talent, a very, very good brain right from the start. He went to Cambridge and he went into investment banking, where he did very, very well for 5 or 6 years. He worked for the likes of Lehman Brothers and Nomura. He then decided that, on the verge of making it big, the $1 million were on the table, and he decided that's not what he wanted. He wanted to do something different. He wanted to serve the people and lead a much more God-centered life. He left that and he went on and worked and created, to some extent, the National Zakat Foundation here in London. So he did that for a further 7 or 8 years. He's now become, going into the next phase of his story. He's becoming a teacher and teaching, kind of being God-centered and a God-centered life. And I'm very, very excited to speak to him, and we really kind of go through his story and through that kind of arc of what he did and what he became. And I hope you really enjoy this. Of course, as per ever, please subscribe, like, comment. Let me know if you have any questions for him, and I'll pass those on. So please, let's welcome Iqbal Nasim.
Assalamu alaikum, Iqbal. How are things?
Salam, very well, thank you. Yourself?
Alhamdulillah, not too bad, not too bad. So Iqbal, you and I have known each other for a while now. We go back, I think about it, probably go back about 10 years.
Yeah,
time
probably.
flies. Yeah. So I remember when I started off at PwC, Rakib introduced us.
That's right. Yeah.
And we did a workshop together. And I remember you were starting off with the NZF then, and we've been in contact ever since, and we've had so many great conversations, so many frustrating ones as well.
Oh really? I don't know about those. You'll have to tell me about those. Yeah.
And we've done some good work together, and we had that workshop that didn't go so well once, which was a learning experience, I think, and it was good.
My memories for events aren't that great. You'll have to remind me what happened. Yeah.
We'll go into that at another point. So I'm really happy you were one of the first people that I wanted on this podcast. Because, like I say, we're relatively close and we know each other relatively well. And you're one of the few people who gets the idea that we have to work on ourselves, and we have to also focus on doing something for our community. And I think for me, you're one of the people who really embody that, really live that in a real way. So I really wanted to speak to you around kind of your journey since the beginning. So I don't want to do too much of an introduction, but let's kick off. I mean, tell us about your background. Where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in London and grew up in London, so it's not particularly exciting, I'm afraid. I think I spent a brief time slightly outside of London in Kent,
Right.
in the southeast, but yeah, mostly it's been in
family
London,
or
London.
small, or what's your family like?
Yeah, so I'm the oldest of 3. I get younger
Okay.
sister, younger brother. So yeah, all the eldest sibling
Traits, being bossy.
Yeah, absolutely. Always been in charge. Yeah.
And where did you go to school?
So I was fortunate, actually. I went to a very good school. It's called King's College in Wimbledon. So it's a very well-renowned school, and was fortunate to get a scholarship at the school, which meant that even though it was a fee-paying school, but basically we didn't have to pay any fees. So alhamdulillah, yeah, I was there from the age of 8 to 18.
And what did you enjoy? What were you good at school?
What was I good at? Well, alhamdulillah, I mean, I was a bit of a academically I think academically gifted. Yeah, a bit of a nerd. Worked quite hard. So yeah, like I mean, the things I enjoyed. I mean, I enjoyed languages. So I did a lot of languages.
Right.
Alhamdulillah, I got A stars in all my GCSEs and A's in all my A levels.
Sure.
But of my GCSEs, I did a number of languages. So I actually did Urdu and Arabic GCSE.
Really? Okay.
2 years and 1 year before the normal GCSE year. So when I was 14, I did my Urdu. I think I did first, and then Arabic when I was 15.
Are your family Urdu speaking?
Yeah. So my my mum's actually, she was born in Kenya, but she's from Gujarat. Her family, she's a convert actually. She converted to Islam.
Right.
And my dad was he's from Bihar in India. So my mum speaks both Gujarati and Urdu, but yeah, my dad spoke Urdu. Yeah. Anyway, so did Urdu GCSE, then Arabic GCSE, and then I did obviously English, the usual English. I did French, I did Italian, I did classical Greek, and I did Latin.
That's a lot of languages.
Yeah, so modern.
Yeah.
Yeah, so modern and classical languages. Yeah, so a lot of GCSEs.
Bit of a linguist.
Yeah, so actually, I would have probably taken languages for at university. I actually won a few years earlier, I had won the classics scholarship at the school. In fact, I think they told me that I'd won the classics scholarship and the modern languages scholarship, but then they decided to give me the classics scholarship for some reason. Anyway,
the classics scholarship, is that to do with the classics as a
classics is in Latin and Greek.
Latin and Greek, right. Okay.
Yeah, it all sounds very
the Odyssey and all those sorts of things.
Say again?
You'd have to do the Odyssey and all those sorts of things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I did. I remember we were like giving speeches in Latin and God knows, yeah. So pretty crazy stuff. Anyway, so yeah, so languages definitely I enjoyed. I was very good at maths and so maths and stuff. And then A levels, but A levels I did AS level. I don't know if they still have that now. I don't know what they keep changing the system. Yeah, so AS level Latin, which meant that just the first year only. Then I did maths, economics, history, and French A level. Yeah.
And I suppose the question is, did you have an aim in mind then? Did you think I want to do this, or did you think let's just see how?
Not really, to be honest. It was like a tactical choice. My A levels, like a mix of different things.
Give you a choice.
So I wanted to do economics. I actually enjoyed economics at A level. I actually then ended up doing it at university, but I hated it at university. I enjoyed it at A levels.
Right. Is that because it becomes a lot more statistical and a lot more?
Yeah, I don't know, very theoretical, technical. This seems to be more and more, just gets more and more removed from reality, really. So I didn't enjoy that. So I did 2 years. Alhamdulillah, I got a place at Cambridge University. So I did 2 years of economics, but you can switch basically to, they have a management studies, what they call the management studies tripos. Basically, so it's a single year that you can combine with a different subject to complete your undergraduate degree.
Right.
So I switched to that. So I was at the Judge Business School in Cambridge, a very nice building.
Yeah.
And I loved so my final year was management studies basically, which I really enjoyed. So that was good. Yeah. A lot more practical, a lot more real world. So very interesting.
I have a question that comes off of that. Now, I know that the current environment, and I have small children, and the current environment is very much, focus on academia. You have to study. If you study, this will happen and that happen. Yeah. And especially when, my wife knows mothers who are taking their kids to 11 plus and all those sorts of things. Sure. Did you have that kind of pressure at home, or was it, Iqbal, we'll get on with it?
No, there was definitely, it was very coordinated, planned, a lot of hard work. Yeah, so there was a lot of that. And partly that was for us because, alhamdulillah, myself and my two siblings, we all got into top schools on scholarships, and the scholarships were academic scholarships. So we basically ended up paying very little by way of fees at fee-paying schools. Alhamdulillah, we all received a good education in that sense. And but obviously a lot of work went into that, and there was definitely a pride and a determination in basically being the best. I mean, to put it simply, there was no, not to mince the words around it.
It was the very Asian thing of going, study or you're going to get your best.
Absolutely. So that's how it was. But I mean, my own perspective on that, in terms of for my own kids and stuff, is a little bit different. I mean, I would say my parents were not heavily. I wouldn't say that they were classic South Asian parents in being very deterministic about what we ended up doing or studying.
Right.
Not too much. my dad certainly, for myself and my brother anyway, like it certainly had an ambition around like us becoming going into investment banking.
Really?
So that was something she actually, from an early age, he kind of he sort of put that into our minds that this is a good career path.
Right.
But which, so both me and my brother did end up doing some time in investment banking, not too long. My brother only did a year or so, and I did about 5 years. But my brother did history, for example, at university. He was also at Cambridge University. He did history, and my sister was at SOAS. She did Arabic and Islamic studies. Anyway, but so yeah. But in terms of my own kids, like I think that I definitely think that things are changing so fast at the moment in the world. I do think a lot of education, or the way, I don't think that the schooling system is adapting fast enough. I think by the time they get to university age, I think universities may be largely or quite redundant actually. And the pathway to kind of like jobs and all the rest of it is going to be different. And there's a lot more scope, even more scope nowadays than there was then, for sort of self-starting, entrepreneurial, creative kind of ventures. Which, to be honest with you, certainly for my own children, and I'd definitely encourage others to think maybe in this way, is really to take the trouble to sort of recognize and appreciate where your children's natural interests and talents are, and just try and nurture them. And if you are going to go through the standard sort of schooling system, then it's certainly to just make sure that I suppose they've got enough time and support outside of the normal curriculum, where if it's possible even to sort of develop those talents and to just do stuff and take risks and try things. So yeah, and I'm my oldest. I have 4 children as well, alhamdulillah. My oldest is 8, but so at this stage, as the sort of 11 plus pressure and all of that starts to ramp up, I'm certainly in 2 minds about the merits of all of that, and whether or not even staying in the normal sort of schooling system is even the best thing for them. I don't know. So something we're sort of discussing at home and figuring out. Right now, things seems to be in a reasonable balance, but I don't know if the sort of the almost like, actually, funnily, I mean, the rat race almost of the education system as it is the right way forward for.
I have this perspective where I think our parents, and I suppose I speak for myself, I can't necessarily speak for you, but they had this idea, and it was a very, very real idea in terms of they saw it in the world and therefore they believed it, which was, if you're well educated, you will make money. If you become a doctor, if you become a lawyer, if you become an accountant, these things will make you money. Or apart from that, you could do business. And 30 years ago, that 35 years ago, that made complete sense. I think that paradigm shifted completely, where a lot of the people who are very wealthy are not wealthy because of their education, their schooling. They are wealthy because of their education. They're not wealthy because of their schooling. I think that has become a very real thing. So we have to, I think, decide whether we are wanting our children to be wealthy or educated. And those things might not necessarily be the same thing, but they might kind of Venn diagram across each other.
It depends how you define educated, right? So I think before, when maybe we were growing up, then what the education system ended up providing people with was not so much wealth but stability. So you can get a stable job, stable income, right? You can maintain a profession, whatever. So you at least get that stability. Not that necessarily was going to make you wealthy, like actually properly wealthy, but it would give you stability at least. Whereas now, I think, and now if you say, well, I don't think there is a choice between educated or wealthy. It depends how you define education. So if education is having, if education is passing, tests in certain subjects, ages, okay, fine. But if true education is about, really, knowing oneself, knowing one's context, knowing how best to apply oneself and add value. Being able to add value in that context, with absorbing as much of the reality or the information around you as possible, but then like doing something meaningful with that, then I think that is the fastest route to wealth, is to do something which is valuable and meaningful to you,
right.
but also useful and meaningful to others.
Yeah, I agree. And then so I suppose you went to Cambridge, you did economics. How did you find that?
Yes, I did 2 years, as I said, 2 years economics, 1 year management, and I didn't like the economics, enjoyed the management. Outside of that, like just generally university life, I think was a bit, obviously it's if you're conscientious about, who you're spending time with and not kind of getting into the sort of wrong kind of things, then it was not like it was. So I just felt it was a lot more, I felt it was a lot more isolated, more insular than, for example, school was, right? In the sense that you could mix with whoever at school, and because it was like a controlled environment, you didn't necessarily, from a social perspective, you could get on, you could have decent relationships with whoever, and it didn't have to kind of stretch in, it didn't have to go into, places where you would feel, say, uncomfortable that you were, let's say, displeasing God at the same time as doing whatever you're doing. Whereas at university, that dynamic changes, I think, quite a lot. So it's quite hard. It felt as though it was quite hard to have any meaningful relationships with people unless, like, there was a strong sort of basis of alcohol and the kind of socializing, which maybe would be difficult for a believer. But so that wasn't ideal, or wasn't. I mean, it wasn't as I would have liked it. Would have liked it to be different to that. But there was, was fortunate that there was a really good sort of group of Muslims at the time, quite flourishing Islamic society. So I ended up putting a lot of time to the Islamic society and that whole scene. And actually, I think just within 2 or 3 months of me starting university, the then treasurer of the Islamic society vacated his position, and then I ended up being brought in to fulfill that position early on. And then in my second year, I was the vice president, and in my third year, I was the president. So I was, climbed the ranks of the Islamic Society at university.
And did you enjoy Cambridge as a city? Because I stayed in Cambridge for 6 months, and I really liked it. And I'm one who doesn't like anywhere apart from London. And Cambridge is an amazing city.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the architecture, just the environment.
Yeah.
It feels a very comfortable kind of it's just a comfortable environment. It's like a student city, right? And so
it is. Yeah, it's very nice.
Yeah, no, I definitely enjoyed it a lot. Yeah.
And then once you'd finished Cambridge, once you got out of university, like you say, you had this input from your dad about going into investment banking. Did you go, right, that's what I'm going to do, or did you think about it, or was there a discussion there, or did you just go, right, I'm going to whoever, JP Morgan or whoever it was?
So whilst you're at university, there's a kind of obviously you're aware of the whole kind of milk round and internships and people trying to getting jobs, summer jobs and what have you. So actually my first year at university, or after my first year, I was able to secure an internship, and so that was now summer of 2003. Can't believe it's 19 years ago.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, summer of 2003. So I did an internship at Lehman Brothers with the investment bank.
Wow, really? I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So interestingly, so I had got this internship through some sort of diversity scheme. There's an organization called SEO, Sponsors for Educational Opportunity. So they were newish at the time in the UK, and providing places at banks. I think it was mainly investment banks at that time, and then they grew to other sort of types industries and sectors as well. But yeah, basically it was like for ethnic minority kind of students and stuff. Now the reason I went that route is because through the normal route, no one was taking on first year students. It was very uncommon to get an internship after your first year at uni. You'd have to be in your penultimate year, because from the company's point of view, they want to basically find people who they can then offer a job straight away. Anyway, I was just, so somehow on their criteria, they said, okay, first year students is fine. So I applied, but I was successful. And then they have to kind of place you with a particular firm. But actually Lehman Brothers was, I think, pretty much the only firm that was happy to take on a first year student. So anyway, that's how I ended up there. So I actually ended up doing 3 internships at Lehman Brothers in different places. So after summer 2003, after my first year, then the next year 2004, then after graduating as well, because whilst in my second internship I was offered a job, full-time job, to start in the summer of 2005, but I asked for a deferment until because I had planned to travel abroad, and I did go abroad for about 7.5 months to Jordan. And I completed my memorization of the Quran because I had actually started formally memorizing the Quran at university.
Right. That's quite old. That's not normally people do it a lot younger.
Yeah.
Okay.
I studied Arabic from a young age, so my mum had arranged for me and my siblings to sort of be taught Arabic from an early age every week. You know, from the age of, I don't know, like 9, 10 or something. We had the imam of the local mosque, of Wimbledon Mosque at the time. He came down to our house every week. I think it was a Saturday morning or Sunday morning, and yeah, we used to, you know, have lessons, and so I did a lot of Quranic Arabic over the years. So my Arabic was strong, and so yeah. So then I thought, okay, look, I should, you know, I had a good memory, alhamdulillah. So yeah, I started at university. I did about half at university, and then finished the rest of it in an intense way over 7 months in Jordan. And I also did other Arabic studies and other studies, but Islamic studies and what have you. So that was good. So then April 2006, then I started at a full-time job at Lehman Brothers as an equity analyst, which basically means I was in the oil and gas team, which basically means you just researching into oil and gas companies listed on European stock exchanges and providing sort of investment advice around those companies, basically.
Right. So excuse me. So up until this point, like, you know, you're what, 25?
No, not 25.
No, you're not 25, 23, right?
So when I started at when I started my job, I was at 22.
Right. Okay. So you're 22. You've had multiple scholarships. You went to a very good school. You got A's in GCSE. You got A's in A level. You went to a very good university, one of the top in the world. You did very well at that university. You did very well at the social elements that you could be involved in. You got a job at Lehman Brothers. So by the time you were 22, alhamdulillah, there was a lot of success in your life. What were the failures?
Up until that point, I don't think that I don't think I feel over that period of time, like, well, on a personal level in terms of achievement, like in hindsight, you can think about things that obviously one could have done or learned or what have you, right? But I don't know if that's necessarily failure. Not like, but if you're talking about like failures that I was aware of at the time that, oh, I have failed at something, you know. I mean, there's not much really. The most I can actually think of, I know this sounds ridiculous, but the most I can actually think of, if I remember that something that affected me at the time, was that at the time, again, I don't know if it still exists, but when I was doing my A levels, there was something called an advanced extension. So it was like a further level thing you could do. So I did an advanced extension in economics, and instead of a distinction, I got a merit. You know, so I think that was as much as I was aware. You know, I felt, and then later on, when I started work, and then I started studying for this CFA exam, Chartered Financial Analyst. So I passed I passed level 1 fine, I think, and then I think level 2 I might have failed, but then if my heart really wasn't in it, to be honest, and I think I took it again and passed. I can't remember. Level 3 I never bothered with in the end, because I ended up leaving anyway. So that I felt was a bit, you know, I felt a bit sort of gutting. But alhamdulillah, you know, generally in terms of the career, even the career in investment banking and the work I was doing there, like alhamdulillah, I was successful in you know, generally speaking, what I was doing. I was exposed to things and I was able to do things, and supported to do things by my boss at the time in the team, which other people weren't doing, you know, even for years, you know, after I've been around some years. So alhamdulillah, you know, generally that was all you know, all successful. So yeah, a lot to be grateful for and thankful for. I mean, you know, we didn't grow up for most of our growing up. We didn't grow up in financially you know, good circumstances at all. So we were, you know, there was most of my childhood was in relative financial struggle, I would say, as a family. And that's actually one of the main reasons why I chose, even though I didn't really want to actually, I chose to initially to go into investment banking, because that's where as a job, it's really the only job where you make proper money quickly. And so I think in my first year, because after my first year they have a ranking system, and I was like a top ranked analyst or whatever. That was like in the boom years. Like my bonus at the age of 23 was 50,000. That was a bonus.
Wow.
And your base salary is like 50 or something. So you're making like 6 figures in year one at the age of 23, right? So yeah, but then my dad, but then for me, the intention was my dad can stop working, he can relax, I can take care of things.
But what were some of the things? So alhamdulillah, you got a really good job straight out the out the gate, and you got a really good bonus. So what did you do? Did you go out and celebrate? Did you say that?
I remember that. I cleared some debts, and initially the idea was just to save up to buy a house, and so I think I got one of the very last HSBC Amana financing.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, because I think soon after that they closed down.
Yeah.
So that was around 2009, basically.
Right.
Yeah, and just I remember I have a fond memory of a family holiday that we took at the end of 2007. We went to Cape Town in South Africa.
Right.
So that was a very nice.
That was a celebration.
That was one celebration, I think.
Okay, so let's go back to 22 again, and alhamdulillah, you've had all this success. What are some of the practices you had that you feel led to that success? What were some of the thinking, some of the regular actions that you took that you felt, okay, this is the reason I'm doing so well in getting all these scholarships, passing GCSEs, A levels, and university, and getting a good job? Were there regular things that you were doing that you thought, this is the thing that I would say is the reason for my success?
Just hard work, really. I mean, from a young age, just a lot of hard work. Like we definitely, as I said, I think we were in a home environment where academically, like, we were pushed, not to a breaking point, but certainly to a level where.
So you would come home from school, and you would then start studying again?
I mean, I can't frankly remember all the detail of it, but certainly there was a lot of extra stuff. Yeah. Right. So like extra things being completed, like, books and resources and whatnot, right? Just extra things being completed, right? Whatever they might be. But at the same time, I also want to mention that, which I think is perhaps has been an even more beneficial part of my upbringing, was the fact that certainly, my mum very much encouraged and sometimes forced us to be involved in lots of extracurricular things as well,
right?
And especially from a kind of from the perspective of sort of say Muslim community activities,
right.
So from a young age there's a few different things. So as far as school was concerned, she really pushed me to go into to do like join and do things like public speaking, debating, like these kinds of things. So I remember there was like these public speaking competitions and prizes at school, which were voluntary. You didn't have to get involved, but and I wouldn't have naturally wanted to be involved, to be honest. But but my mum said, no, you need to go and you need to go and do that, right? Yeah. So that's something that definitely allowed me to be a confident speaker. And so throughout school, at university, since then, like I've always, I've done Friday khutbahs, for example, from a very young age. Just presented publicly. So now, obviously now, it's kind of second nature to me, and I don't have any, so then a lot of the fears that people still have around just presenting and sharing information and what have you, like I don't have. So I think that just to be a kind of confident communicator is something that I was definitely felt was a big part of my upbringing that helped, and also an organizer as well. So just things like, even though they sound like small things now, but I do think they had quite a big influence on me, is that over 10 years or so, between the ages of, say, I don't know, 10 and 20 years, I was regularly organizing like a weekly football kind of session for young guys in the local community. And over the years,
did you play?
I don't think it's still going now. No. I didn't still play. No. Apparently I could never play in the first place, but more, I think I was there more so just to put on the show for everyone else. But the but yeah, like, so over the years, maybe 200-300 kids would have gone through that, you know.
Right.
And so we were there for a couple of hours. We'd play like 2 halves. In between, I'd do a short talk, you know, just to kind of remind people. And it's funny because even sometimes when I pass by, you know, come across people today who have been out of touch with, but they attended at the time, they will still mention how fond memories about that time and actually how it positively influenced them and impacted them, you know. So alhamdulillah, you know, that was good. So things like that, I would, you know, sort of deliver us on Friday evenings, deliver a circle, you know, so host a sort of circle of like, again, young boys, and just talk about, you know, we would just then talk about sort of, you know, just deen things basically, right? Quran and, you know, prophetic example and good character, and so just preparing for those things and having to deliver those things, you know, was I think just got me from a young age conscious about adding value and organizing and helping people in that particular way, you know, as far as their faith was concerned.
Was the stuff that was happening at home in terms of, you know, the encouragement around education, was it rational, was it creative, or was it more basic, read, write, add up, do these things really well, or was it kind of in those kind of larger areas?
I think it was mixed, but obviously, like, you know, you sort of, but then there's an encouragement just to excel at the curriculum that you're given, right? But I think it was mixed for sure. Like one of the other things I remember when I was in my later teen years was that, you know, my mum basically had to bribe me to complete the Duke of Edinburgh award.
Oh, I did that, yeah.
The Edinburgh Gold Award I did. You know, and I really hated things like going out and hiking and these kinds of things. But I have to say, like the hike which we were required to do for that, which at the time was like 4 days, 3 nights, 50-mile hike. Like I think for me that was definitely a sort of a turning point in my life, really, because I remember one thing I gained from that was I became just less fussy about everything. I just remember that as being something which was definitely it changed me, was that I just wouldn't fuss about anything, because when you're, you know, when you're in an environment where you're out in the freezing cold, right, and you're coming out of your tent at, I don't know, 7 a.m. and you're like, your hand is shaking and you can barely like switch on the kind of gas lighter, right, to get the stove going to heat up some really, you know, dodgy looking sort of tin of baked beans or something, and then that's what you're eating for breakfast, right, or before you get on, like, then all of a sudden, you know, all these nice foods which you were sort of complaining about, and you didn't want this vegetable and that thing or whatever, now it doesn't, you know, anything goes.
For me, I mean, and you'll be familiar with this, coming from a South Asian family, we are very well looked after by our parents, especially our mothers, right? And I found that very similar experience where I went out there and I thought, you know something, no one's looking after me here. I'm going to have to do everything for myself. And it was both gave me some confidence that I was able to do that, and B, it really, you're right, it just said, okay, we don't need all those things. They're nice to have, they're great to have, but you don't need them really. You know, we can survive perfectly well without them. And actually, I felt like I had a very almost spiritual, I mean, as spiritual as you can as a 14-year-old, waking up in the morning in a tent and it raining really hard. You know that sound you get of the rain on the tent, and waking up and thinking, do you know something? This environment where I am now, with this sound in my skin, there's no way that I can feel that I'm alone in the world. There's no way that I think that there's just me and all of this has just happened and it's all coincidence. There has to be something greater. And you know, we're brought up as Muslims, and you know, we recognize Islam as our religion, but there has to be a point at which we have a feeling or a rational kind of comprehension of being connected to a creator. And that for me really happened on that little small memory, but I definitely feel that was a, like you say, a turning point. You know, so I would always encourage you know, my children to do that kind of thing, because it really is, it is amazing. It's a very beautiful thing. Definitely. So let's return to Lehman Brothers. So you are now an analyst. You're 22, mashallah. You're making big bucks. How long were you there?
Well, Lehman Brothers obviously collapsed as a firm
You
in
contributed
September
to that,
2008.
firstly.
Say again?
You contributed to that, firstly.
No, I was a victim just like everyone else. Yeah.
Do you know, I was working in the administration.
Yes, that's right. You were picking up
Yeah.
the pieces. Yeah.
Yes, I was picking up the pieces.
Yeah, but look, I was on a serious note. Like I was on the obviously that was a debt-related crisis. Yeah, and obviously my book was
No.
in equities.
Yeah.
Right. So on the other side, so I could definitely claim immunity from that whole.
Yeah.
So but yeah. So September 2008. So from April 2006, which was when I started, to September 2008, was working at Lehman Brothers. The day it went down, which was I think September the 15th, if I'm not mistaken, was on Monday. So that evening, me and my dad were flying off to Umrah actually. So this was the middle of Ramadan, and so we had booked our tickets to go for Umrah for the last 2 weeks of Ramadan. So which was alhamdulillah, which was a great experience, but obviously a bit distracting because of the fact that basically you just lost your job in effect, and so there was all this dramas going on about what was going to happen next. Anyway, alhamdulillah, long story short, I ended up staying with Nomura. Nomura is a Japanese firm which
yes,
bought out the European and Asian arms of Lehman Brothers. So basically ended up carrying on there in a more senior role. So although obviously that was a very difficult time for a lot of people, but for me personally, in terms of how it worked out, it actually worked out quite well, sort of just in terms of from a career perspective, financially, what have you. But anyway, so that was September, so by the time that started properly, that was December 2008. And I carried on there for another couple of years. So actually 2.5 years. So by the time I actually worked for a short period at another firm after Nomura in a similar role. But then in 2010, I decided to myself that, look, I need to get out of all this, basically, because I felt that, and I think what it was is that some of those, let's say, sentiments, intentions, motivations behind those activities that I talked about that I was up to, from a young age, working within the community, then my kind of Islamic society stuff that I'd been doing at university, and then generally the fact that, I was still very much involved in, giving sermons and encouraging people, in the company, even right to pray and whatever else, right? And we had a good social kind of scene there. It was just this kind of gnawing feeling that actually there's like I should be sort of contributing more, doing more, and actually the only reason I'm doing what I'm doing right now is the money. It's not even because I enjoy it anymore, really. Like I did definitely enjoy the work, and I learned a lot in the period that that in the first few years. Learned a lot, had a good team, just as I said, was exposed to a lot of things. So in terms of my skill development, my exposure to different things, what have you, right, and my delivery, alhamdulillah, like, was all good. But then after a few years, I just felt this is going stagnant, really. And there were some options like within finance, obviously, to try different things, do different things, but I just didn't feel that I had the motivation was there. And certainly that was certainly not definitely from a financial standpoint, me having been there for a few years helped, of course, in terms of my family, in terms of the family situation and everything else. It certainly wasn't like, oh, you've set up for life or anything. No, I mean, I've still had the same old bills for the last few years, and having to think about how to pay them. So it wasn't that, but it was not like I was now financially independent, but I felt that I need to get out, basically, of this. And actually at the point of so over the course of 2010, early 2011, I was just looking around different options. What can I do, and at that time my approach was actually just to look at, well, what organizations exist out there that I can join. So I was still thinking in those terms,
right?
So I wasn't really thinking in a more sort of, call it, entrepreneurial or like individual kind of way, but just like, is there basically other group of people I can join to do some good work, or more meaningful work. So that journey led me to meet with Azim Kidwai, who was and still is the CEO of Mercy Mission, and so we met for the first time, I think it was late 2010, early 2011, And I basically told him that, you know, I want to get out. I'm looking for roles or whatever. So what's going? And so we had a bit of back and forth. Maybe it went kind of quiet for a while. Then I pushed it again with him. And then, over the course of 2011, I ended up joining initially Mercy Mission for a voluntary position. So
really, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So and at the time, I actually had a guarantee. I was in a position where I had a guarantee, like a financial guarantee from my then firm that I was working for. That if I stayed for another couple of years, I'd effectively receive the equivalent of $1 million in compensation, right? But even that just wasn't enough. I was so kind of desperate to be doing something on a day-to-day basis that I felt I could, you know, account for reasonably, right, in front of Allah, and say that yes, I'm doing something, you know, for you. I'm trying to live completely, if you like, for you, right? And for me, that means the way in which we use our time, resources, etc. If you actually zoom out and don't think about your day-to-day, you know, job or career in those ways, but just think about it in terms of how you're using your time and what contribution are you making, instead of just thinking about it purely in terms of, oh, my job, my career, my income, but just what's happening to me and what am I doing and offering. Then, and you strip away the financial considerations, you know, I think a lot of people, when they think about the jobs that they're in, they're not actually, you know, overly motivated. It's not them, right? They've just molded themselves to fit a certain thing, really for the income, which is not that it's not an important consideration, but it's important to be eyes open to what's going on, at least, that what is being sacrificed, which oftentimes is your autonomy, your agency, yourself, right, for whatever it is that you're giving yourself for. So so for me, I had got to the stage where I was so desperate to be doing meaningful work that I don't really care how much I was going to get paid, you know, to stay where I was. I just wasn't going to take it. So I left for a voluntary. When I say voluntary role, well, what happened was that you know, Mercy Mission said, okay, well, we discussed different roles, and initially the role was to be a sort of a chief financial officer for Mercy Mission globally. So Mercy Mission was a number of different countries, but at the time, specifically at the time in June, when I met with Dr. Tawfiq Chowdhury, who was like the global sort of lead of Mercy Mission and the founder, he said, look, from a budget standpoint, we won't know exactly where we are until after Ramadan, you know, because Ramadan obviously is a typical fundraising period. And so he said, you know, you can join us now, but voluntarily for a few months, and then see how it goes. And if we have enough money after Ramadan, then we'll start paying you, you know. So I said, okay, fine, you know, that was fine. So literally, you know, my income went from wherever it was, to basically zero, you know, overnight. You know, with the hope that, okay, some minimum amount that I needed just to keep things going would come a few months, which alhamdulillah then it did, you know, so that was fine. So it kind of worked out from that perspective. But what also happened at the same time in those months in the second half of 2011 was that I realized that this particular role, which we had carved out, in actually experiencing it, wasn't maybe the right thing for me precisely. And at the same time, that was the year in which National Zakat Foundation was launched as a project of Mercy Mission. So I wasn't overly involved in the launch at all, really. That was, you know, mainly Azim and another brother called Sajjad, who currently is the CEO of a charity called the Charity Right. So they were mainly kind of, you know, spearheading that campaign with a few volunteers, etc. I was actually for that Ramadan that year. I was in Australia because Mercy Mission had just launched a new centre in Australia, Islamic centre in the city of Melbourne, and that's where I actually met my now wife.
So this was going to be one of my questions.
Okay.
Were you married when you jumped from?
No, I wasn't. I mean, I had been in a marriage, a short marriage from 2010 to 2011. Which ended in early 2011. So 2011 was quite a roller coaster year for me, because at the beginning of that year, I went through a divorce. I left my, you know, basically career, my job in investment banking. So, you know, there was all of the difficulty and the sort of internal kind of dramas, let's say, of that whole period. But by the end of that same year, I was married again. and had then just started out as the sort of the project manager of National Zakat Foundation, this new project that had just been launched. Yeah.
So the question that springs to mind is, obviously, you went into investment banking, and it was, from what you've said, it was a decision that had been influenced by your parents, which is fine, which makes sense. When you decided to leave that and then essentially go from good income to, for at least a little while, no income, how did your parents take that?
Yeah, so they were actually quite supportive of it, to be honest with you. I think there was some discussion, especially with my dad, about maybe staying for a little while.
Take the money for one more year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but that would involve me staying for a couple of years, which at the time, I can tell you, like, it felt like
forever. Yeah.
It felt like 200 years. Like I can't just do it anymore. So I was just so demotivated with it, basically. So yeah. So basically, but they were supportive. I mean, there were still those responsibilities on me, and that was fine.
Yeah.
But I just sort of, I trusted that things would be okay. So
and it felt like you from what you said, you were in a relationship, in a marriage, and that ended in that same year. Do you feel like there was a connection there, or was that a separate thing and that just didn't work?
No, I didn't think so. I think they were separate. They were separate. They were separate things. So one was just about me. What am I doing in my life? What contribution do I want to make, etc. And then the marriage stuff was, I don't think it was really connected to me leaving and everything else. No, I think there was just two. But in a way, it was, in hindsight now, looking back at it, it was almost like a period where I was then disconnecting from things that weren't working out, right? In terms of marriage, in terms of work.
What's satisfying you in your
so job. That was okay, fine. So these things aren't working. Now let me try and pursue this particular path. And I honestly believe that as a result of that intention to do something more meaningful, and even though at the time, again, in hindsight, I was initially relatively blind or clueless about what exactly I was going to end up doing, right? It was just just work with fellow Muslims on some Muslim stuff, like that's really was almost as specific as it was at the beginning. But it kind of, but I think that the just so many doors opened and so many kind of good things resulted just from from that decision. And that's why for me, that there's a verse in the Quran that whoever relies upon Allah, then Allah will be sufficient for him, or will suffice him. And actually, I have on my desk, I keep this that verse here that is there. وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. This is one of those classic wooden pen cases that you buy in Egypt, in Cairo, one of those sorts. Right. So I remember, I've had this on my desk for years and years and years. So yeah, like I just I think I experienced that, like I lived that. I think that people, not everybody might be aware of this in principle, but I don't think everybody actually has fully experienced, fully trusting in Allah about something, and then seeing the results of that come through. So yeah, I just feel that because of that, I mean, I would never have thought in my wildest dreams I'm going to now meet my wife in Australia, in Melbourne, in Ramadan, and then basically get married, just a few weeks later. I mean, it was like,
how do you feel your mental health was in that particular period? Because like I said, it was quite a turmoil. You got divorced, you left this long-term job that was very successful. Did that put you in a good place, or did you feel like, oh sugar, I'm going to have to do some work here to make sure that I'm okay?
Yeah, well, definitely the getting over the divorce definitely took some time, but I think actually leaving the job helped.
Yeah, but you bounced up because
leaving the job, I think, was a positive for me. They go through the divorce, and obviously that's a very difficult thing for anyone, right? For any couple. So that was not easy, but anyway, it is.
So let's go to Australia. So you're in Australia. How do you meet you're now
I'm in Australia, and so in Australia, the reason I went to Australia was because they were launching this Islamic Center in Melbourne, and it was called the Melbourne Medina, and they wanted to launch a program in Ramadan. So myself and another brother, his name is Sajid Umar. He was one of the teachers for the Al Kauthar Institute, etc. So he was there.
Yeah.
We were both basically like leading Taraweeh prayers together and doing some talks and what have you. I mean, he was, I think, the main act. I was just sort of a sideshow, really. But we stayed together for those couple of weeks, which had fond memories of that time. And then there was a brother there who at that time was doing some volunteering for Mercy Mission, I think in a legal capacity, and he through his wife basically introduced me to my my wife. So we met on the 29th night of Ramadan, actually.
Oh, mashallah.
It was after Taraweeh prayers, because clearly we just couldn't find another good slot. It seems a bit irresponsible in hindsight. Not really the time to meet, but anyway. And so we met for an hour, literally just for an hour or so. And I think she had to she had and has family in Sydney,
Right.
so she had to travel to Sydney just the day after, a couple of days later, and then I was coming back home anyway after Eid. So we literally just met for an hour, communicated remotely for a few weeks, and then just decided to go for it. And you'd think that for someone like myself who'd been through what I'd been through previously, that I'd be a bit more biding my time, etc. Thinking carefully. But yeah, I just realized with these things was just quite impulsive, really. And well, no, this makes sense, and this is a good thing. And I think one key thing for me was just in a way that might be beneficial maybe for viewers if you're not married, etc., is that I think that part of the reason why this particular marriage maybe has alhamdulillah flourished and survived is because, from my perspective anyway, like I felt at the point of getting married, I understood myself better, and I knew, was clear about what I wanted in life, and so all of the ambitions in relation to furthering Islam, helping build a stronger, more confident Muslim community, etc. These were all things that I was very clear that they were much more front and center in terms of what defined me and what I wanted to do and how I would spend my time, and what was like my key drivers. Now, it's not that those things weren't of interest to me before, but they had kind of got lost a little bit, obviously, in the career and everything else, right?
Yes.
And so I don't, so I just think that having that as a kind of a base as to all the motivations to why you're actually marrying this person now, who and where your prospective wife is actually aware of and understands that this is what she's coming into. Is coming into a partnership that has these end goals, fundamentally. And I think that's like something which is a marriage which is a bit more purpose driven.
You almost had a vision for the marriage in terms of, this is my vision for life, and then the marriage has to be a subset.
And I remember I wrote to her, and I remember writing to her and saying basically, this is who I am, this is what I want, and these, with some detail about the future and what I dream about and hope for, etc. And so if this is good, if you're up for this, then then brilliant. But
this must be a very brave lady, mashallah, to go with that and go, yeah.
I think we joke sometimes still about the fact that she doesn't know how she fell for it, really.
You tricked her.
Yeah, must be that killer charm.
Mashallah. So tell us about so now you're this project manager of NZF. How do you go from project manager to you're in charge, mate?
No, so but me being project manager did mean that I was in charge of NZF. It just meant that NZF was still constituted as part of Mercy Mission. So I was still reporting to others within Mercy Mission about NZF. It was just one of a few projects that were running at the time. So but over a couple of years, so by sort of towards the end of 2013, and because now I had gone through a couple of Ramadans, which is obviously the main kind of fundraising period, and NZF had now grown. I think the income in 2013 was got past £1 million or around that kind of mark. And so it was kind of sizable enough now. It was almost becoming 80-90% of the income of the the organization overall. So so now had put forward the case for NZF spinning out into becoming a separate entity and charity. So eventually that was supported, and I think that was the right and the mature thing to do. And so it became a separate charity 2013. That was also the same year in which it launched in Australia and Canada as well. And yeah, so when it became a separate charity, obviously I became the CEO of the organization. There was a new board, and that board has obviously evolved over the years as well. So yeah, and then from 2013 until the end of 2021, that it was just a question of growing National Zakat Foundation, trying to figure out what Zakat is, trying to just developing an understanding of what like just a sort of theory of change for the future of Islam and Muslims in the United Kingdom. So yeah, that was
what do you feel were your key successes with NZF?
I think overall one of the key successes was just the fact that the idea of local giving, local zakat, was just more on the map. The fact that we were able to raise awareness amongst Muslims about Muslim poverty and Muslim difficulties. It's kind of like, it's well documented in a way, but I think that because and there's a natural part of the immigrant mentality, which is the fact that, well, the places we have come from are a lot worse than here. But that still obviously doesn't take away from the fact that there is still, sometimes a great degree of suffering amongst people who are living, and our neighbors and our fellow believers, and that it needs alleviating, basically. And certainly, over the years, one of the categories or the groups of individuals who are most suffering in the community in this country are refugees, asylum seekers, specifically asylum seekers. Obviously, once you become a refugee and you have refugee status, then things are a little easier. But certainly in the asylum seeking category, like there's just a lot of hardship and difficulty. But at the same time, even people who are just British citizens and have all the normal eligibilities, well, even now is a good, what we're seeing in the news today is a good example of how yes, they're absolutely, I mean, even based on the government's definition of poverty, there are well over 10 million people in this country living in poverty. Yeah. So and Muslims are actually disproportionately highly represented in that group. Now, that poverty might be relative, but it's still real, and it's still, you have to live with it on a day-to-day basis. And so one of the achievements, I think, was just highlighting that, raising that fact. I think even amongst international relief organizations, there just became more awareness of this, and many of them initiated kind of UK-based programs, let's say, partly because of their own donors, perhaps, raising this as an issue, partly because of NZF's existence and the narrative.
Just to kind of cross you slightly there, I agree with you 100%. Before the infamous workshop, these things weren't happening, right? Nobody was talking about local giving. And what I did notice is in the last 3 years, 4 years, almost all of them are now talking about some form of local giving, because they realize this. They realize that, in terms of poverty, we're amongst the poorest, amongst, jail, people in jail, we're not well represented there. Drug issues, we're not well represented there. Low performing GCSE and A-level results, we're not well represented there, etc., etc., etc. So there are many socioeconomic factors that our community is poorer than it should be. Way poorer than it should be. And I suppose that the next question kind of flows off on that point, which is, in your experience, your 8 years that you spent as CEO, what did you see as a core factor? What was the reason for that? Did you see anything that was obvious that you say, oh, actually, the reason for that is this? I mean, it's obviously poverty. Poverty is undoubtedly one of the key reasons that all of these things happen. But beyond that, was there anything that people were doing which was obviously leading them down this road?
Which road are you talking about now?
The fact that we are falling behind in all of these areas.
Oh, I see, yeah. No, I think poverty is like a root cause, really. Because like once you're in a certain kind of you become into a certain environment, a certain mentality, and then the impact on health, the impact on education, that broken households, etc. So like all kind of plays a part, you know, in then Muslims appearing, you know, disproportionately, sort of in a worse off in a number of different categories when it comes to sort of just in terms of demographics, your achievement. So that's been a root cause, and I think it's been improving. And the census results, I think the early census results are going to come out later on in a few months. Maybe the more details later on will give us a bit of insight into how things have developed.
Have changed.
Well, one thing we all know is that we'll be, you know, the fastest growing population, because in the as far as the birth rate is concerned, we're top of the tables, I think. But as far as everything else, we'll see how it's been developing and growing. I think situation has been improving, but obviously you're in the context of a wider, because Muslims are obviously disproportionately focused in what were previously like industrial kind of towns and cities, you know, and those places generally have been economically, it's just in a really difficult kind of situation and place. So that's definitely been part of it. At the same time, there's been you know, there has been a growth in a very successful entrepreneurial and business kind of ventures amongst Muslims. There's clearly a growing, what you might call middle class, you know, professional scene. Like you and I have seen that over the years. You know, the number of Muslims especially in sort of accountancy, professional services, you know, consultancy, finance, etc., clearly increasing, right? But obviously that doesn't. So I think there's a lot of inequality within our community, and again, I think that's probably even more pronounced than the inequality that's out there in the country generally. So you know, this is why it's not the only solution, but certainly I do believe that Muslims could solve Muslim poverty in the UK, right? Like regardless, obviously we're in a broader state kind of context, infrastructure. There's a welfare state and everything, and all the national policies that, you know, leveling up and whatever, right? Let's deal with all this. But like I'm just saying, regardless of all of that, and even though it's all important, I think the message that NZF was trying to get across, and got across to a certain degree, but there's a long way to go, is the fact that if we as a community of Muslims and believers, with our own resources, are able to tackle most of the issues that we have at hand, not just in terms of poverty alleviation, but actually helping people, you know, develop and move up the ladder, if you like, and get to a point where, from an aspirational standpoint and from an actual kind of standpoint, like in terms of then education, especially health, etc., like things are just in a much better place than they are. That takes a lot of effort and work, but that's work which I think work has been happening in these areas, but it's been quite one of our major problems as a community is is that it's a merit. It has advantages, but in this regard, I think it has disadvantages, that we're very unstructured. We have a lot of institutions and organizations, but there's the cohesion, the collaboration, the leadership. We don't have an agreed way of thinking about how we want to structure ourselves, basically. And so and unfortunately, I think that some of the organizations that are supposed to be, say, umbrella bodies, leading organizations, etc., are largely like, they don't seem to carry have really like a deep level of support, I would say, amongst, you know, and I'm not
I agree.
I'm not even saying that as a criticism. I think it's just a fact, right? And it's not easy. Like, having developed and grown National Zakat Foundation over the years, like, yes, alhamdulillah, it's an organization that grew and handled a lot of zakat over the time, and the number of people who contributed, you know, it grew a lot, but still the traction of it, relatively speaking, in the grand scheme of things, given the size of the community, is still relatively low, you know. Like and so there's
where did it start at? Well, when you first started, what was the income of?
Well, like year one, it was, say, 250,000, and when I left, it was around 6-7 million.
Right. So that's amazing in terms of, if you plotted it out on a graph, that's amazing. But actually, you know, if you looked at the population of the UK, which is what, over 1 million Muslims?
Oh no, a lot more than that.
2 million Muslims.
Oh, so now we must be around we're probably 4.5 million now. At the time of the previous in 2011 census, I think showed, if I'm not mistaken, between 2.5 and 3 million Muslims. Yeah.
So
but
let's
let's say, like,
Muslims now. We gave £1.50 to NZF.
Say again.
If we're 4 million now, we gave £1.50 to.
Yeah.
NZF.
Well, let's just say, well, no, let's not talk about £1.50, bro. What's that? That's a pocket change. But let's say there's a million Muslim adults.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and among them, let's just even say conservatively, there's 500,000 zakat paying Muslims.
Yeah.
500,000 zakat paying Muslims on average will be paying, at least £500 of zakat. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Which would equate to around would equate to around 250 million.
Yeah, that's where we should be.
Right.
And we could make significant leaps and bounds with that kind of money.
Of course, exactly. Yeah. So even if local zakat when local zakat is in the 100 million range, which is where it should be as a minimum, even if we want some degree of balance between local and international spend, then of course you're making big waves and big contributions just to a lot of different things, basically. So yeah, that's where we need to get to. But I think part of this whole issue is, and this is why I don't want to jump the gun too much, but one of the reasons why I've moved to be focusing on what I'm doing currently is because I want to be able to make my contribution to what I call, sort of improving or changing the Muslim mindset.
Yeah, exactly.
And because a lot of this is an educational and an understanding issue as well, meaning that our understanding of what Islam is, what God requires from us, how we're supposed to view the context around us, having a sense of vision, where do the pillars fit in,
right.
Goal of salah, zakat, etc. Like these things are I think mostly misunderstood. In fact, I would even say that I think they're actually, well, if not misunderstood, they're barely communicated by our religious leadership. So imams, scholars themselves, aren't talking in a visionary way about what the future looks like and what basically Islam and Muslims have to do with it. And
so let's get into this then. So it's what, 2020 when you started doing Transform My Salah?
Yeah. So Transform My Prayer began as a course in 2019, at the end of 2019. Yeah. Right.
Okay. And then so over the next 18 months or so, it became your main mission. So how did that happen?
So I think that what happened was that what I realized through my time at National Zakat Foundation was that the thing that I enjoyed most about the work was not so much being the CEO and managing people and making budgetary decisions and just the operational kind of things, all necessary, all necessary. But it was more like the education, like just the sort of the ideas aspect of it. Right. Understanding what zakat is, communicating that, conveying a sense of like the narrative, vision, etc. And so that's what I really enjoyed. Now, even though the organization has developed to a place where the CEO hopefully can spend a decent amount of their time focusing on that narrative building, external focus communication, education, etc., and the day-to-day can be taken care of, by the operational kind of team. For me, it was still limiting in the sense that I wasn't able to spend all my time doing what I wanted to do, let's say, and also that it was limited to one topic or subject. And there's things that obviously when you're in that certain positions that you're just limited from speaking on, because obviously if you want to talk about things which might sometimes be a source of tension, maybe even some controversy or whatever, right, as people are figuring out their understandings of stuff, then you don't want that to impact the organization. So but anyway, my passion really, and I think to a certain degree my sort of skill set is around trying to understand basic issues, concepts, ideas, and then conveying them to people in a way where they feel they can be faithful and the things are conveyed to them in a way that they can reason with and they find relevant and compelling in plain English, basically. And so that was the driver for why Transform My Prayer came about. Is say, okay, well, if in my mind I'm thinking about, I want to make helpful contributions to the future of Islam, And if part of that theory of change is saying, well, actually, the pillars of Islam, the foundations of Islam, well, what are they? They need to be in place, right? Okay, I've been working on Zakat, and that's one thing, right? Zakat operating and functioning as a mechanism is going to be helpful and necessary for this. But also, where are people with regards to their salah? Now, you can't talk about a future for Islam and Muslims anywhere if you're not going to give some attention to what's the quality and the consistency of their prayer, because it's not just about the ritual completion of these acts, but it's about the fact that the consistency and quality of our prayer provides the connection, the regular connection between us and our Lord and with each other, that paves the way for success in this life and the next, basically. And provides in this life a number of benefits in terms of our mental, emotional, psychological state, our sense of priority, our sense of just frankly courage, and like a sense of tranquility. So all of these things, they come as benefits of consistent regular prayer, being having confidence, a strong connection, and just living really truly faithfully. And so so part of the so then I said, okay, fine. So then, just as I have been spending time trying to understand and disseminate and communicate what Zakat is, well, how can I do that with Salah now? Because I know that, from anecdotal evidence at least, right, that people, Muslims aren't praying regularly. And if they are praying, they don't even understand what they're doing half the time or why they're doing it. So it was to develop a course to help people who were interested in improving the consistency and quality of their prayers. So I started teaching that in person in my local area at the end of 2019. And alhamdulillah, since then it's developed. With COVID, it went online. And then the uptake was obviously a lot greater online just because of accessibility and everything. So yeah, since then, almost exactly 2,000 people have taken that course now from around the world, actually. So it had some international kind of, sort of audience as well. And there's another, 14,000 that have sort of benefited closely in some way from maybe attending a webinar or downloading a resource that I put together. So yeah, and inshallah the next one of these will be taught in Ramadan, starting on the 3rd of April, inshallah.
So how long is the course? I mean, what's the?
It's about 10 hours of content, basically.
Fine. And is it done over 2 days, or how you?
No. So I've delivered it in different formats. Sure. The most intensive I've done it in is basically over like 8 days.
Right.
Like once a day for 8 days, maybe with a small break in between.
Yeah.
But I've done it in different formats, like weekly, an hour a week for over a number of weeks, or in Ramadan it's half an hour a day for 20 days. So I've done it in different formats, basically, but effectively it's the same 10 hours of content and delivered it in that way.
Right. And what kind of feedback have you got? What's the kind of the input from people?
Generally, overall, that really positive. In fact, I just on Saturday, I was at a so this is 2 days ago. I was at a janaza, and just whilst I was there, those people I knew and I didn't know, and just randomly people coming up to me saying, "Oh, your pro course, I took it was really good," and that. So it's nice when that happens, and I regularly get pieces of feedback from people about how it's really changed their perspective, changed their life, changed the way they think about things, and so that's been really rewarding, and really, like just a really nice impact to have really on people, where they feel their connection with their Lord is just stronger, clearer, more compelling for them because of having experienced the this course. Because really I'm telling you, like, what I'm doing in this course is really very simple in a way. All it's basically doing is, helping people to understand in real terms what exactly is behind the actions and the words of the salah. That's literally it, and it's just about a process where someone who's interested can be facilitated to just think a bit deeper about what's actually going on and why they're doing what they're doing. And I think that's the thing. I think because a lot of the practice of salah or namaz in our kind of culture is sort of inherited. It's not really, it's kind of like, it's always, okay, you just do it. And maybe a lot of people have had like negative or kind of traumatic memories or experiences with regards to it, meaning that, either being forced to, or they don't really know why. And maybe there was like some sort of physical or corporal punishment if they didn't, or whatever. And in the madrasa, maybe a lot of people are put off because of their experiences of that, the whole scene as well. You know, and also actually when even in the 90s, for example, when there was just this growing sort of there was a growing sense of religiosity, generally speaking, but a lot of it was quite heavily focused on the externals, you know. So you would remember debates around, you know, like how you move your finger when you're in the sitting position, whether your feet are touching when you're, you know, in the congregation. A lot of the discussions, the debates were all around these things. They weren't really, exactly, raising the hand. So they weren't really about like the real part of it, which was
what's the point of this? What are we doing? What are we saying? And
your focus, concentration. Exactly. So again, I'm not saying that. I think that it's not that the material that I teach and share with people doesn't exist out there at all. I think what's missing from what's out there is that it's just not packaged in a way that people feel that there's a beginning, there's an end, there's a journey I can go on here and actually go on with other people. Right. You know, there's tons of stuff on YouTube and elsewhere on all sorts of things, but unless you're like hyper disciplined, right, you're not, and because of the volume of stuff that's out there, you don't know where to start. So for me, I think actually just labeling, packaging, designing a particular experience around whatever the issue is, whether it's Zakat, whether it's Salah, whatever, and there's other things that I'm doing as well, like just to give some packaging to it and a presentation of it and a structure to it is really important, because I think nowadays there's such an over supply of information, you know, sort of knowledge, and you know, people just don't know where to begin, frankly. So the curriculum aspect of things for a layman's point of view is almost kind of, it's just, people just don't know where to begin. The good thing about Salah is everyone knows that it's foundational and it's critical and it's vital. So in a sense, I think it's just sort of doing something which I always felt, and you know, before I started teaching the course myself, I can tell you, like for years, because it had occurred to me for years that like this is something which just doesn't seem to be addressed sufficiently. It's not taught sufficiently. Like if somebody wants to know how to improve their prayer, like where do they really go? You know, like even in mosque, it's not really being taught, you know, ironically. So I would always, you know, whenever I met an imam or a scholar or this or that person, I would actually encourage them, say like, why don't you put something together on this? Why don't you put something together on this? And as far as I can tell, hardly anyone did. So I just said, I'm just going to do myself.
How are you getting the word out? What's the strategy for that? What's the, you know, are you on Twitter, etc.?
Well, so currently all of my stuff is I have a website just in my own name, iqbalnasim.com, and
we'll put a link in the
and so yeah, and I'm on various bits of social media as well. Have a Telegram channel.
Give us your all your details, and we'll put them in the
thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, but overall now, so my where I am now is what I'm saying to people is my aim is to deliver transformational educational experiences to help people live truly God-centered lives.
Right.
And I have a particular focus in 3 areas. So one is Salah, and the course I've developed for that is called Transform My Prayer. Second is Quran, revelation, meaning people being able to just have an understanding and a familiarity with the key messages and the themes in revelation, and actually understand what is it that God has actually said. A lot of topics and things that we know of and know about, we know things about them, but we don't necessarily know precisely what has God said about such and such.
Right. We understand what's being said roughly, but we don't know it in God's word.
So if you take a simple thing like, say, you know, like the topic of dhikr, remembering God, or you know, the life of this world, right? Hayatul dunya. Like these are, you know, oft mentioned, oft repeated things in the Quran as examples. But a lot of us, if we say to the average person, okay, so tell me, what does Allah say specifically about the life of this world?
Right.
Okay, we might come up with 1 or 2 things, maybe, but there's a lot.
Vague themes, right?
You know, and when it comes to remembering Allah, we might know the part of the verse, maybe if prompted, oh, is it not with the remembrance of God that hearts find rest? I know that, but okay, fine. But what about the other 50 places, you know? So I just think, so for me, what I've been doing there is like running classes that introduce people to the key themes of the Quran in this way. So basically take a particular topic, look at the various references to it, break it down, and just help people understand things better and hopefully, you know, improve their thinking, actions, etc. And then finally, the final part is, so on top of the Salah and the Quran and Revelation, is leadership. So in a way, using my own experiences of going from what I went to and going whatever I've been through, to help people think about how they can make a better contribution to God's cause, as I call it, right? So for me, God's cause is, what are we doing for Islam to flourish? So if you do something, so this is how I kind of explain it. I say, if you do something for God's sake, that's like, okay, your intention is pure, your motivation is pure. That's you, let's say, traveling the straight path. But if you do something for God's cause, that's you facilitating that path for other people. Right? How are you opening the path? How are you making more attractive? How are you
laying down the bricks or the tar, or making sure it's smooth and it's travelable, and the signs and all that sort of thing?
Exactly,
yeah.
Just facilitating things. How are you basically helping others maintain or find their faith, their connection? So in a way, that's what obviously the work of the prophets and messengers was. Since there are no more coming, as far as I'm aware, then it's our job, right? The job of believers anywhere and everywhere to bear witness, to lead, and to have that concern. And I think that's something which I emphasize a lot, and I think that is missing, is that a lot of us, it's understandable to a degree, but I think we need to move beyond it, which is that we have if we do have a social concern, then it's for the Muslim community. And typically what that means is that Muslims are kind of left alone, allowed to practice, not disturbed, at least tolerated, if not respected, whatever. Okay. So that's fine at one level, right? But we need to go beyond narratives that are just about sort of the surviving, Islamophobia, whatever. And actually, true faith means that we have a greater concern for wider society.
Right.
So even if we are maligned by them, or by part of society, that we have a greater concern for others finding truth, of living faithfully, etc., etc.
Yeah.
We all function and operate as though all the lines are drawn, because Muslims are the Muslims and non-Muslims are the non-Muslims. This is how it is, and now we are just another group, that's a minority group that's fighting for its rights and what have you. That's it's understandable, or it's easy to see how we've got there, but I don't think that's the best place for us to be in our minds and in our practice.
I was thinking about this, and I thought to myself, what would the Prophet do if he was here?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure he would be fighting Islamophobia. I'm not sure that would be his biggest concern right now, with all of the ills of society, people dying of hunger. Our world is a mess in every way. And, there was Islamophobia at the time of the Prophet, right? And he didn't really focus on that. He focused on his message and doing good and spreading peace, right? Those are the things that he focused on. And so I do understand. I mean, I'm not maligning anyone who wants to kind of highlight the cause of Islamophobia, but I'm not sure it's our biggest concern right now.
So it is. It's a very. I mean, leaving the debates around the term aside, because personally, I really hate the term, to be honest with you.
Silly term, but yeah. I know what they mean.
And I think rather than discussing how it should be defined, we should almost. I think actually we should just do away with the term. It's a horrible term, really. I mean, because it's funny, because there's no other faith in the context of which we use the same construction, just linguistically.
No Hinduophobia.
Yeah, or exactly,
right?
Christianophobia, Judeophobia, whatever. It's just, so it's if we have like anti-Muslim hatred or anti-Muslim prejudice or whatever, that's something which I think is a lot better as a term. Islamophobia, personally, I think should be just done away with, because I mean, just thinking, whenever I think of this, I think of, what other phobias do I know? Yeah,
arachnophobia.
Exactly. That is
not spiders.
No, exactly. So that is literally the only other actual phobia I could think of, right? Was arachnophobia. And I think there was this like
that film.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that film. Yeah, exactly. But like that was the only kind of phobia, right? And now, okay, we've got, all you have now is Islamophobia, and you've got homophobia as well. And again, interestingly, from our perspective, right? Like, as believers, we have our views in terms of all of these things, right? But homophobia feels like the wrong term to describe what we feel. Like, it's not fear of such and such.
No.
Phobia is fear. That's what it means.
Exactly.
it kind of comes, and it's funny actually, because it puts us in this position where it's like, well, with regards to that, we might, by some definitions, be considered to be irrationally afraid of such and such. No, we're not irrationally afraid of anything. We have our rational reasons to why we think there are certain lines around how, well, literally, I mean, sexual intercourse, basically, right? And how, and the basis of how family should be developed and built and whatever, right? And so there's theological and rational reasons for as to why we believe what we believe. But when it comes to, and so when we're stuck with the same term, imposing the same term on others, oh, he's Islamophobic, she's Islamophobic.
No,
it's not. It's not actually that they've got a phobia about Islam, right? They might just have. Oftentimes, it is just shown to be some sort of, is tied up in a racial kind of things, right? But then we say, oh yeah, Islamophobia is racism. Anyway, for me, it's all a big mess. It's confusing, and I think it doesn't help us and doesn't help others, frankly. So it's not to take away from the fact that such a thing exists. Clearly, there are people, and it's just recently there's been new research showing, right? There's a lot of negative attitudes towards Muslims, whatever the reasons are. Our job really is that you can do the defensive kind of approach, but I don't think the defensive approach worked very well in the end. What we need to do is, I think, exactly as you said, have a priority on our own message, explaining what we believe, who we are, value proposition of who we are. Now, the difficulty we have is quite hard to convey the value proposition, or conveying the value proposition doesn't have as much meaning if we ourselves as a community are not living. So if we are, as Muslims, the worst off on all these socioeconomic indicators, that's exactly conveying the kind of success, right, or the kind of results that you would hope would come from being faithful. Because if being faithful means you end up as we are now, the community, well, yeah. So that's why I do feel at our current stage, that's why for me personally, my work, I have a disproportionate focus on basically what I just say, well, helping Muslims actually be Muslim, truly. I say sort of helping Muslims, capital M, be Muslim, small m, because Muslim, capital M, is like this sort of contemporary,
it's just your name. It's just
social, social grouping or a label, right? Almost a cultural kind of label. Whereas Muslim, small m, which is by and large the vast majority, if not all of the references to Muslim Islam in the Quran are improper nouns or proper nouns, let's say, that it just translates to mean subservient to God, committed to God, devoted to God, basically, right? And so when we truly become committed to God, truly, and that relationship is central, and that's how we're living, and that's how we understand ourselves, and we're able to understand, articulate, and convey who we are and what we believe in plain English. This is really important. I mean, even Allah says we didn't send a messenger except by the language of his people.
Right.
And so the fact that we are actually unable to be godly and share what faith and godliness means in plain English, a lot of us find that quite awkward. And again, I understand why, because the way in which we have learned, right, is often through a linguistic framework that is mixed up as well. Maybe sometimes South Asian languages, through maybe some Arabic, whatever. But actually, it's as if English, the white man, all of this stuff was that,
agree. So I think you mentioned this on Twitter the other day. So you mentioned this on Twitter the other day. If we are going to say, you and I are speaking, we say, when are we meeting? And I say Thursday, and you say, okay, that sounds good, inshallah. When you're saying to Jonathan,
right,
why are you not? Has your faith changed?
Right, exactly.
You no longer a Muslim? That you don't think that you have to say inshallah? I mean, you don't have to say inshallah, but maybe you say God willing.
Exactly. So that's the thing. So that's the thing. So the thing about that phrase is that, and other things that we say to each other, is that actually they're not precise. Like we've almost categorized them as forms of dua, for example,
right,
or kind of
normalize them is the right word, right?
Like the point is, even saying inshallah in Arabic with each other as English speakers
is a bit,
that in and of itself is strange. Like there's not, like, as a phrase, like why pick out that phrase? Do
Yeah.
you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Like there's as if that's a kind of, there's something specific about that phrase. Like there's no merit to saying inshallah over saying if God wills. Like you're saying the same thing. What matters is what you're intending by what you say.
The other day I saw the age-old, quite frankly, nonsense argument that someone said, God says in the Quran, da 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 da, and someone in the comments is going, "Why are you saying God, brother? You should say Allah." It's like, come on, are we still there?
Anyway, well, yeah, I think you do get that. Some people write to me about that, yeah. But anyway, I mean, you know, that.
That's the point, right? That's the.
Yeah. Well, what I say to people, I think one thing which I think helps people get this is the fact that neither Abraham, nor Musa, Moses, nor Isa, Jesus, you know, well, exactly, they didn't speak Arabic, they didn't worship in Arabic, they didn't call Allah, right? As far as we can tell. So there's different wordings they would have used. So why are we so kind of caught up about it, you know? Anyway, whatever. Point is that yeah, that's why the focus, I'm saying the focus of my work is that, and in terms of just how we just need to be confidently faithful. You know? And I think there is a difference about saying, well, we need to be confidently godly, God-centered. You know, there's a difference between saying that and if we say, oh, let's everyone be confident Muslims. You see, the problem now is just the word has become associated with a certain psychology, right? So if you now say be a confident Muslim, it means, yeah, I'm going to do what I need to do to be a Muslim. I'm going to make sure I do my prayers and blah 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 and everything else, all good. But there's something it's almost as if it's become like, you know, as a form of defense almost, or protection, you know, against how you're defining yourself relative to the other person as opposed to how you define yourself relative to God.
Right.
And so it's about saying, well, no, let's just be really faithful and have a genuine concern and a desire for other people, whoever they might be, to find that same faith. Islam, as in submission to God, is not just for Muslims, it's for everybody. So we take pride in saying, oh, the Quran is a universal message and the Prophet came for everybody, etc. We're not living in that. We're not living with that same spirit. Exactly. So I think that's a critical thing that we need to do. And I think one of the main things that we, you know, as part of all of this is that we need to put into practice for ourselves and figure out really like what the full implications of being a Muslim are today, and convey those. What does that mean for the environment? What does that mean for the economy? What does that mean for the family sort of for the family unit? Exactly. What does that mean for gender relations? What does that mean for, you know, whatever, all of these topics and issues that affect people, right?
etc.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And actually to convey that, to show why God-centeredness is the foundation, the necessary foundation to build a healthy, prosperous society. And that should be our concern. That was a prophetic concern. Build a healthy, prosperous society, you know, on the basis of a belief and a submission to God. That's basically what it is. And it's, you know, and establishing justice, etc., etc. That's what we need. That's what we need to be doing. And at the moment, what we often do is that we kind of divorce the two things. So the faith part is private. That's us. We go out there, we might be involved in different, you know, amongst us, we might be involved in different causes and advancing different things. But when you divorce the two things, you're going to end up stuck, basically. Because the reality is, if the godlessness part remains, nothing else is it's not going to work. Because all of this is integrated, right? For a community to flourish in the way, through our kind of understanding of what flourishing means, you need to have the acknowledgement of God's authority central to that, and then you build from there. But if that doesn't exist in the first place, then, you know, all of the, you know, pursuing all of this and that causes and everything else, it has merit, but it has more individual merit for the person pursuing it rather than necessarily a long-term kind of merit or benefit for the, you know, society at large. So that's something I think is very important for us to kind of figure out, work on, and actually, you know, I do feel, unfortunately, that there is a real, you know, poverty of thinking and scholarship and like just, I don't know, like the intellectual contribution to these things seems to be really lacking, to be honest. I mean, I have not spent personally, like I haven't, the fact that I'm having to do what I'm doing is actually a kind of weirdly a sort of a sign that things aren't quite right, because I don't even think I'm qualified to do most of what I'm doing in some ways, you know.
Right.
Like, it's not like I've studied and stuff for a long time, but it's been a part-time thing. It's not even been my main thing. But people who have, like, I say to them, or say to you if you're listening, like, well, where are you right now? Like,
where are you?
What message are you giving? Why is it still the case that people complain?
This should be a message in our khutbahs on a Friday,
right?
right?
I'm going to say, why is it still the case? So many people, I still see it and hear it all the time. You know, people complaining about the quality and the content of like the average Friday khutbah, for example. You know, people aren't really thinking about addressing like issues in a just in a productive, universal kind of manner, and that's that I hope is something that will change. Because if that doesn't change, like, you know, then we're.
So where do you see this organization in kind of 3 to 5 years? How do you think it will develop?
Which organization?
Your kind of.
Well, I don't really see. Yeah, so I don't really see it as an organization. I just see it as me.
A project. Yeah, I was gonna. You know, when I was thinking of that question, I was thinking, do I call it a project or an organization? And I chose organization.
It's just like, to be honest with you, it's just me. Like, if I really put it in blunt terms, the way I describe myself is, I'm just a guy who's trying to figure things out, and if I think I figured something out, I'll share it. That's literally it.
Right.
You know. So for me, the key question is, what does it take for faith to flourish in society, and why should anyone take it seriously, and what are the benefits of it?
Right.
That's it. And so that's what drives these kinds of areas or topics or things I'm thinking about. You know, with the prayer stuff, okay, that's necessary. Why is it necessary? But also to try and think about it and teach it in a way that actually anybody could benefit from and understand. What are the benefits in terms of and then from the Quranic standpoint, how do we understand you know, the Quran? If the Quran is to be the basis of our own sort of reforming ourselves, improving ourselves, and improving society and reforming society, then how do we translate the messages of the Quran literally and metaphorically, so that people understand its wisdom and its power, and we can put that into action. Similarly, when it comes to like leadership, I think that, you know, the more believers who take this effort seriously and this understanding seriously, then the better off we are. And I think that in a way, like, I do have a particular, I have a particular, let's say, concern for, or a target, let's say, and I think maybe there's something of an appeal for what I might call like professional working sort of Muslims, right? Because on the one hand, it's great that there's increasing numbers of believers established and well established in different professions and contributing and flourishing, etc. Good. But at the same time, I think a lot of our talent is lost to the rat race element of all of that as well. So that actually your ability to contribute to the furthering of Islam and, you know, and everything else, is like, yes, you can, if you're mindful, you can do it really effectively whilst doing almost through your work and through your engagement in, you know, professional engagements. But I think many people lose sight of that. You know, they lose sight of that responsibility and that duty, because in their mind, the two things are separated. You know, the faith element is one thing and the career is one thing, something else. And so they're not sufficiently integrated. But I think there's a lot of our talent, which for fear, frankly, of, you know, for fear of resources and more income, I don't know what, right? For fear of failure or what have you, like, they don't actually pursue like meaningful projects, meaningful work that can really add value in society and be beneficial for the future of Islam and Muslims, you know, in this country. So I think that's something I think it has definitely improved, it's changed, and you see a lot of good examples. So, you know, that's really encouraging. But I think that there's a lot more of that we need to see. And so I try to use my own example, my own story, my own journey as a way to encourage others to tread a similar path. And I think actually there's more of an ecosystem or infrastructure now to support people who want to do that.
Yeah.
So I do think that I always tell people, I say, if you've got a really good idea and a plan where you can add value, and it's aligned with your passion, your skill, it's aligned with this idea of being in the service of God's cause, and you are a capable person, what have you, right? Then I say to them, if you're worried about how this thing is going to be, how it's going to fund itself, or how it's going to self-sustain, or what have you, then figure all that other part out and then tell me. And I say to them, I'll figure it out for you, even though I don't know exactly how I'm going to do that. But I feel that there is a network of people that I have, you know, come across, and who I know, and some of whom are very close to me, that they're like who are taking this whole issue a little more seriously and want to support good works. I just think there's not, at the moment, I think there's still not enough people putting themselves forward, they're happy to put their neck on the line to say, I'm going to be the one to make sacrifices, to make difficult decisions, to live a more prosperous, to live a more meaningful life, if you like, that lays the foundations for the next, for the next generations.
So are you going to get Mob up and running then?
Oh, Mob. Okay, so Mob is this
the idea that we had.
Sure, yes. This Mob translates to Muslims on board. So there's been the idea also to call it Bob, believers on board. Yeah.
So, Bob doesn't sound anywhere near as threatening.
Bob's your uncle and all that. Anyway, so that's something which yes, this is an idea that basically encourages more Muslims to get involved in board positions, trustee positions, governorships, whatever, in various sort of civil society organizations, charities, and what have you. And the idea of that simply so that people are contributing positively, faithfully in society at large, and Muslims are just out there adding value, and increasing representation and all of that too, right? Because that's that's also an important thing. So yeah, hopefully this is a project. So I'm not, for me, my own personal focus is the education, researching, writing, speaking, courses, etc. But this is a particular project where, so I'm actually seeing a few people this week, talking to a few people about who've put themselves forward to possibly lead on this thing. But definitely, if there are others who anyone who's managed to get this far in this discussion, who wants to put themselves forward as someone to lead on this particular project,
and as long as I'm getting the due credit for the germination of the idea, I'm happy to help in any other way.
Wasim, we know that's exactly why you're involved in all this, so that's fine. Don't worry, we'll give you plenty of praise for everything you haven't done. Don't worry.
Yeah, wrapping up then, I suppose in the last few minutes, what are the key kind of principles that you've adopted that other people might find useful over the last kind of 20 years? What are the things that you think when something comes in, you go, all right, is it A, B, C? Do you have that kind of thinking format?
Well, I think one of the things that I think people say that I'm, sort of, I don't know, I would say good at, but something that I do is just ask the difficult or challenging question. And usually that question begins with why, right? So like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? Why am I doing whatever I'm doing? And I think that when people apply this question to themselves, why am I really doing the job that I'm doing? Why am I spending time with these people? Why am I reading this book? Why am I on social media? Why ABC? If you can't come up with a compelling answer, or an answer that you're happy to present on the day of judgment, to be frank, then there's a problem, basically, because it just means that there's just something which is not sufficiently linked to your end outcome.
All of your actions ask.
And this is the thing, I say to people that, look, you've got to link your all of the small things that you're up to at the moment, you've got to be able to link them to that end goal, that end picture, because that's the moment which is coming very soon, where we're going to have to account for ourselves, right? The thing about human beings is we are, there's an idea of choice and responsibility, basically, right? We make choices, we have responsibilities, we have accountability. And so that choice, responsibility, accountability applies to everything, how you spend your time, how you spend your money, how you get your money, who you spend time with, how you deal with your relationships, the whole works, everything. And so how much of all of that and more is really, if we really ask the why questions thoroughly of ourselves, then in the context of us standing in front of our Lord, then, and if we force ourselves to then filter or refine what we then choose to do with our time and our money and everything else in a way that is gearing up, really leading up to that moment, then we will be successful. Because I think that's what it means to purify yourself, basically. And that's why I call my leadership program Last Day Leader. right? The idea of last day leadership means that your contribution is always with your eyes, or your kind of your motivation or your understanding focused on the last day where you have to account for yourself, but also your last day in this life. Means that you don't know when that is, but it could be just around the corner. So that gives you a sense of urgency. So if you're constantly thinking about, worried about the fact that, okay, my last day in this life might be coming up, that gives you a sense of urgency and sense of urgency. And if you think about the last day, meaning in terms of your accountability in the hereafter, then you're thinking in terms of your then that gives you a sense of kind of your focus, or being able to clarify your intentions and motivations, basically. So that's really it, to be honest with you. I'm not going to say much more than that, because I don't think I am the most structured person. I don't think I'm the most disciplined person. I don't think I'm the most I don't know, like, there's probably lots of things that I'm not very good at. Yeah, I know I'm a huge procrastinator. People don't believe me when I say that, but I am. I think I mean, I don't think, I know I am. So there's lots of areas where I'm no one to give anyone lectures on habits or this or that or anything else. But I do think that the one thing that I feel that when I do engage with people, I am able to impact them by doing what I do for myself a lot, which is basically driven my choices and decisions in life, which is, why am I doing this? And how does it basically contribute to this end goal, and having some clarity of like vision and motivation, such that one needs to be living a life where you can genuinely say, right now to your Lord, that Lord, I'm living for you. There's a verse in the Quran, قُلْ إِنَّ صَلَاتِي وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ وَمَمَاتِي لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ, which means, say, indeed my prayer, my sacrifice, my living and my dying are all for God, Lord of all that exists. So it's interesting how that verse, because obviously it ends with my living and my dying, which is basically everything. But it mentions prayer and sacrifice specifically, starts with prayer. So it's like, okay, the process that you're beginning with the prayer, which is to prove yourself to Allah that I'm going to turn up when you've asked me to turn up. I'm going to put everything else aside, right? Ends with your living and your dying being for your sake, meaning that it becomes all encompassing. Yeah. And so
almost equating the prayer with that is the beginning of your living and your dying. That is
I think it's the beginning of that journey to make your whole life. Right. And even the way you go out of this world in a state where you're truly living with and for God. Right. And that means that all your choices are godly choices. That's what it means. And so making godly choices, God-conscious choices, and living a God-centered life, which is what I'm trying to obviously try and do myself and try and help others do through the different ways I am, that's what matters in the end, really. And so I think that just constantly refining and asking yourself those questions that enable you to think about how real that is for you right now, and what you should change in order for it to be more of a reality. I think that's the key thing. And I think one other thing I'll just mention, which is that I think focus is very important. So a lot of people, I think, have good intentions and motivations. They often lack an ability to focus on really developing and building, a particular thing or a particular pathway or a project or what have you. They're often very scattered amongst different things. Sometimes that can be fine, and people will say there's a particular strength that they're leveraging in different places, and that's fine, because then to my mind, then that's fine, because you do have a focus, right? Because you're applying a particular skill in many different ways, but it's in a disparate way, let's say, fine. Okay. But there's still a focal point or some filter, which is your method of contribution, for example. But I still think that there's people who try to do, I think people who try to do too many things often end up doing nothing at all in any significant way. And I think finding a niche and just developing a contribution, a habit, a reputation around a particular thing for some time, I think is important. Just like, like for the 10 years at NZF, like that's it. I just lived, breathed Zakat. Like that is it. Yeah. And I don't think, if it's not for that focus, I don't think you can really grow stuff. So I think that I think that is important for anyone who's interested in making that kind of contribution. Yeah.
So on the very, very last bit, then the bit that I like the most, I think, if I'm honest, any book recommendations? What are your favorite books that you would say everybody should read this book?
So it really depends, obviously, what you're looking for. But if there's one book, the most influential book for me, and I think I read it at a time that I really needed it, so I would always mention this book first. It's called The King of the Castle. It's written by the late Guy Eaton, Gai.
Right. Yeah.
Aton. And he's written a number of very impactful books. And this usually isn't recommended as his, the first book of his books to read necessarily. But I found it the most kind of effective and powerful. So, King of the Castle. So that's another one that you're showing.
The one that they recommend. Everyone recommends.
That's later. So that was, I think that was published after he passed away. That was a collection of his reflections. Was a collection of his thoughts on or some radio kind of contributions that he made through BBC Radio or something. But this book, King of the Castles, and the subtitle is Choice and Responsibility in the Modern World. So I find it's just very it's very beautifully written. There's lots of really powerful things in there, and it's just about like I think just feels to me increasingly relevant actually as something about giving us a sense of being able to orient ourselves, the nature of the human being, the responsibility of the human being, what life is all about. It's very kind of, say, anti-modernity and anti a lot of the things that are going on that is taking away our humanity. And I mean, even at the time that he was writing, a lot of the things that are currently going on that seem to potentially threaten the very understanding and meaning of what it is to be a human being, right? Like the things that are coming up in terms of technological and like other kinds of sort of changes and influences. Like, I mean, I think if you're reading that book again now, just adds a lot more. It's just very powerful, I think. So for me, it gave me a real sense of, it really helped me to like center myself, reorient myself, give me a sense of purpose. I remember when I was working in, I read it when I was working in that time when I was working in the kind of finance industry, and I was really feeling a bit kind of empty because of all my time, or a lot of my time going in that stuff. And then reading this, I think it just really helped me and just gave me a bit of a lifeline. So very, very powerful book.
And any film recommendations?
Film recommendations. Well, there's lots of there's lots of movies that I like, but
Sure.
I think, I don't know, I'm a bit, I like all the kind of hero journeys, basically.
Yeah.
So Shawshank Redemption, Gladiator, Last Samurai, like all of these kind of just these sort of individual hero journeys, I like. But it's a bit corny, but it's true. That's just what it is. Braveheart, etc. I mean, these are the classics.
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings, yeah. So it's okay, but it's like, it's almost the it's almost like I don't know, the reality part of the ones I've mentioned is what I think is, because
it's too fantasy for you. Okay.
It's not that the sci-fi isn't entertaining, but it's and it's not that you can't relate to it, take things from it. But honestly, like I have to say just on this, because there are some of these movies that I've mentioned, at points like I would be, I mean, definitely resonate with me deeply. Like there's some of them that I would be get quite emotional in because of the journey, the sacrifice. Like for me, that's always been taken by, the sort of those kinds of pictures. And whilst obviously nothing I've ever done equates to a lot of the sacrifices that have been made, and they're just actually a reminder of, even the messengers and the final messenger and the companions, and just the physical sacrifices, that had to be made in order to advance a cause. And I think that's what all of these things have in common, actually, pretty much. Most of what I've mentioned, they're all examples of individuals trying to advance a cause against the odds, basically. So I'm a huge underdog sort of story fan. Any underdog story, like, that's I'm definitely in it for that one. And in many ways right now, like, we are the underdog, right? And
we are the Rocky of the world.
And we need there's almost the opportunity, the space for heroes to emerge, right? And for people to emerge, to really take things forward in such a way that regardless of whether it's remembered in this life or not, it doesn't really matter too much, but but certainly that will. Well, I think it might be a quote from one of these movies. You know, what you do in this life echoes in eternity. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, there you go. So and so there is that. It will echo all these little efforts. They will echo in eternity. And so it's like, what sounds are you making, basically?
Yeah, true.
So,
true. Yeah. So listen, Iqbal, we went over with the time that we said we would, but I think this was a fascinating conversation and hopefully very, very beneficial to everybody listening, because it kind of took us through some of your personal stuff that, you know, people might not necessarily know about, and it was fascinating, and it was interesting in learning, you know, your journey, your underdog journey, and I'm very excited about this new project of yours. I think it's going to make a real difference in that discourse around why we're doing what we're doing, and how do we go deeper than we are currently. And I think that, inshallah, will make a real difference to the individuals that do your courses, and then hopefully they will make a difference to their communities like you are. So I really appreciate that, and, you know, Jazakallah khair, and thank you so much for coming along. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. It was nice catching up.
Lovely.
So that was our conversation with the amazing Iqbal Nasim. I hope you really enjoyed that. I hope you learned some things about him, about his methodologies, about the way he thinks about things, and where he's going next. So that's the end of our podcast. I hope you really enjoyed it. Please subscribe. We're trying to grow our subscription as quickly as possible, and get this information out to as many people as possible. Subscribe, comment, like. Thank you very much. Bye.